Hello, everybody. This is Dean Kevin and Dean Val with the Environmental Awareness Show. Today, we're going to discuss the environment, in which needs a lot of assistance these days because it's being destroyed purposely. And we're just here to help people become aware of what supports them, which is very real. It's not your local politician or president, but it's really the environment that supports us all. And we want to help it be clean. And that's just the start of a bigger adventure here that we're presenting. But let's start with the environment, because that's what we need to sustain our physical bodies here. But today, my part, I'm going to read My Indian Boyhood by Luther Standing Bear. It's the book I've been reading now and then for you to get an idea of how people lived in the past. This is a true account story from a fellow who, Luther Standing Bear, who did live both in the white man's world and the American Indian world. So he's recounting his experiences here as a boy and how they lived with the environment, supporting it, didn't destroy it, because that doesn't make sense. Although people don't get that, they still don't get it. The planet's coming to an end here unless we really get a whole lot of agreement otherwise. So this chapter is 3. It's The Indian Boy and His Pony, it's called. Some of the pleasantest memories of my boyhood are of the days that my playmates and I spent with our ponies. As I mentioned before, every Sioux boy owned a pony and became an expert rider. A great friendship sprang up between the boy and his pony. It is well known that the horse is a very sensible animal, but he is also very sensitive to his surroundings. And after many years of companionship with men, he comes to know the wishes of his owner almost without spoken word. So it was, I and my pony came to understand each other very well indeed. I was kind to him. I was fond of him. And he was kind and gentle with me. The first little pony I owned was black, and to me just as good and smart as any black beauty ever written about. If a pony becomes well tamed, his master can catch him even in the dark, for he can learn to recognize footsteps and will stop to be caught. In many cases, boy and colt grew up together and became life companions. So it was natural that each should know the other well. When first beginning to ride, we were still too small to mount our ponies ourselves. If more than one boy was riding, we would help one another. The largest of the two boys would clasp the hands together to form a stirrup, and up would go the small boy. Then the mounted boy would put out his foot for the boy on the ground to use as a stirrup, and up he would go. If alone, there was no tree stump or no bank to which the pony could be led, we learned to use our wits and strength. For you must remember that when we first began to ride ponies, we were very little fellows. We would catch hold of the pony's mane, wrap our leg around the pony's foreleg, and climb as we would climb a tree. When we were high enough to put our left heel over the back of the pony, we pulled ourselves up into place. We also mounted Indian style, which is the left leg over the right side of the horse. The white man mounts the opposite way. There was another way in which to mount, providing we had a rope with us. Tying one end of the rope to the mane of the pony, we would make a loop at the other end for a stirrup. The rest was easy. If our legs grew tired from riding long distances, we would take a rope and loop it at the two ends, throw it over the back of the pony in front of us, and put our feet in the loops. Sometimes it was necessary for us to break a wild pony to ride. There was danger that we would get kicked or in some way receive an injury, but we were strong and quick on our feet. There were many ways in which to break a pony and get him used to our presence. One way was to drive the wild ponies into deep water, swim up to them, and catching hold of either tail or mane, play with them. We were all good swimmers anyway, horses in the water cannot kick hard, so there was little danger of our getting hurt. We would not be rough with the animals, but just play with them until they were used to us and could see that we would not harm them. After a while, we ventured to climb on their backs, and they didn't seem to mind at all. White men in breaking horses are often rough and cruel. But in all the methods we used in breaking ponies, none of them were hard on the animal. A pony broken with kindness makes a finer and more trustworthy animal than one that has been broken through abuse. Of course, when we grew up with our ponies, they needed no breaking. As we grew up to manhood, they grew up to horsehood, understanding us well as we understood them. These are all glad memories that I have told you. But I have one sad memory, and that was when I went away to Carlisle to school and had to leave my little pony behind. Now, as you probably know or don't know, Carlisle School for Indian Boys was the first one that opened up in Pennsylvania. And there's photographs of like hundreds of boys, Indian boys with their hair cut and in uniforms. And they really regimented them and indoctrinated them into the white man's society. That was the idea, to destroy the indigenous cultures. And he went to this first school here, Carlisle School. I still remember how sad I was because I could not take him with me, although I was to have the company of other little boys and girls who were going with me. I knew that I would miss him. I was only a little boy of 11, and the first part of the journey was 50 miles away from my home, where we get on the boat that was to take us to the railway station. I rode my pony for the 50 miles, and there I had to say goodbye, for I was going east, and I thought at the same that I would never be back at the same time. We learned to ride without saddles or bridles. We used the mane for a bridle, but as for a saddle, we never thought of one. When we had learned to mount and ride, we just sprang on our pony as easily as you boys hop on a streetcar. Anyway, we would go over the prairie, over hills, among rocks and boulders, splash through the creeks, or race through woods. Riding was part of our life. Our ponies were sure-footed, but now and then one would lose his footing and down both boy and pony would go. Quick as the pony was up on its feet, so was the boy, just as if nothing had happened. Scattered over the prairie here and there were colonies of prairie dogs. These little creatures covered the ground with holes so thick that it was sometimes hard for our ponies to avoid getting into one. If the pony's foot slipped into one of these holes, there was sure to be a spill. But even these we got used to. Like all my Sioux playmates, I wore my hair streaming down my back, and during the warm weather of the summer months, wore only a breechcloth of buckskin. I was a real wild Indian. Our ponies were hardy little fellows and knew how to take care of themselves when turned out to range. They were small but very strong. A hunter would come home with a buffalo that he had killed and dressed hung over the pony's back. The load would almost hide the little animal from view. Yet, oftentimes they plowed home for miles through deep snow without showing much fatigue. When turned loose, they dug into the snow with their sharp little hoofs to get to the grass that had turned into hay under the covering of the snow. These little ponies were very sure-footed even on the ice. If a pony was running fast and came to a frozen stream, he would set his feet and skate across, never losing his balance. Where a buffalo stumbled and fell, our little ponies kept up. They were very quick in turning in pursuit of buffalo or other horses, and it was the part of a good rider to keep his seat and take the turn with the pony. No matter if the pony fell and we were thrown clear of his body, we were supposed to be up and on his back by the time he had regained his feet. Even if we were injured, it was part of our training never to stay down. It was not with the idea of doing fancy riding, but the thought of safety first was always in our mind. There could be no more dangerous place for a hunter than to lose his horse in the midst of a buffalo herd. We took falls and bumps which an untrained boy would not be able to stand. Ours was a life that called for strength, quick wit, and skill. But we were as much at home as the little fellow who sells newspapers on the busy street, dodging here and there between swift-moving traffic. I believe, though, that outdoor training is very valuable and that every boy should have this advantage of living a clean outdoor life. And of course, our university that we're creating will be a nature-oriented school. We will be encouraging the kids to pay attention to their dreams, real side experiences, and to really pay attention to what's going on around them. The first part of that, again, is the environment and the dreams that they have, because the dreams show them so much more of life and who they are, because we are more than the physical body. So it's paramount that we look to these real side experiences or dreams for knowledge so that we can basically find out more about ourselves and the creation worlds that we live in. When a pony has reached the age of 2 or 3 years without riding, it was then necessary to break him. Or when the camp had run short of ponies, it was up to the men to go out and on the range to hunt for a herd of ponies and catch some for breaking. First, they made ropes of buffalo hide to take with them. The hair was left on these ropes and they were soft but strong. Then each man who wanted to catch a pony had a long willow pole which had been peeled and dried until it was very light in weight. To the end of each pole, there was tied the rope, the hide rope, fastened so as to slide through the loop. Now, the wild horse is not an easy animal to catch. He was wary and a good hunter. The horses always travel in bands, and there is a scout or watcher for every band. So it's up to the Indian to outwit the pony if he was to make the capture. In the first place, the Indian knows that the habits of the wild horse. Then the animal he rides knows just what to do when on the chase for wild ponies. No, it is a case of man and his pony working together to get the wild pony in a trap. Sometimes the whole camp almost will turn out for a horse hunt. The scouts go out ahead of the hunters and locate a wild herd, preferably in a small valley. Then the horses line up behind the hills at the four directions and out of sight of the horses in the valley. Some of the hunters will show themselves over the top of the hill from one of the directions, say the north. Wild ponies naturally turn in the opposite direction or south. Finding hunters coming over the hill there, the wild herd will turn to another direction. But finding themselves hemmed in, will start circling in the center of the valley, following their leader. After a while, they will begin to tire, and then it is that the hunters get in their midst. Each hunter now selects the wild pony. When close enough to his capture, he puts the loop on the end of the willow pole over its head. The loop tightens and holds him fast. Now begins the task of getting the tame pony and wild pony acquainted. Of course, the tame pony is quite fresh, while the wild pony is getting weary. The rope about the wild pony's neck is made into a halter, and he is tied to the gentle pony's tail, the rope being long enough to pass around the shoulders of the tame pony. The two ponies being tied together in this manner must travel together. This they don't willingly do at first, but the wild pony is not long in finding that it is much more comfortable to follow peacefully than that he is not being hurt. Perhaps you wonder why the captured pony submits so readily. One reason is this: there is no loud yelling, no cursing, no swearing, and no whipping of our ponies. No commotion is made except that made by the feet of the running animals. In the first place, the Indian is not the noisy creature that most white people think him. He is quiet and dignified about his work. He realizes the value of keeping quiet, and that in one of the first lessons of the hunter, that's one of the first lessons, he realizes the value of keeping quiet, and that in one of the first lessons, that's one of the first lessons of the hunter. If everyone begins to yell and scream, the tame pony, as well as the wild one, would share this mood, and there would be much confusion. Besides, there are no swear words in the Sioux language, and no Sioux boy ever indulged in swearing or cursing. I have never seen in all my experience at big roundups the white man able to do their work without terrible cursing at their animals. The white man has never learned the use of his tongue. Another thing we never did among the Indians was to use hot irons to mark or burn our animals, which the white people call branding. The first time we saw a branding ceremony, we were filled with disgust. It is a pitiable sight to see 3 or 4 men sitting on top of a helpless animal, holding a white hot iron on the shivering beast until the stench of burning flesh fills the nostrils. We had no humane societies in my time, but I know that we were humane, and many times we were puzzled at the things that the white man did and said. When the hunting party reached camp, the wild horses were roped and thrown. The right forefoot was tied to the left hindfoot, and the left forefoot to the right hindfoot. When on his feet again, he was not cruelly bound, yet he was not able to strike with his 4 feet nor back with the hind feet. The next step was to convince him that he would not be hurt. His ears, mane, and back were stroked, a rope put around the neck, and he was coaxed to lead. I have seen my father break many horses, and it was he who taught me that it was never necessary, nor was it right, to be cruel. No animal, no matter how small, but will fight back if the captor forces it to. So I learned that force is not wise, nor is it just. When I grew older, my father had passed away. I owned and ran a farm where I raised and trained many horses, and I never forgot what he taught me. Indian boys were all good riders, but we tried to do more than just stay with our horses as they went over all kinds of ground. We boys need to imagine that we were in battle and tried to think of the many things that might happen and how we would meet them. This was to make us quick-witted and brave. In facing an enemy, we knew it was a good idea to keep out of sight as much as possible. Sitting straight up on the horse put a warrior in plain sight of the enemy. So we practiced sitting on the side of our horses while in full speed. A number of us boys would get on our ponies and go out to an open space where we had plenty of room. There we would take turns in riding up and down in front of the rest of the group while they looked on. Pretending that we were riding in front of an enemy, we would lean away over the side of our horse and out of sight of our supposed enemy. Just our knee would be over the pony's back, but our head and body would be out of sight. We would ride this way until, after considerable practice, we would be able to stay in this position at full speed with just our heel over the pony's back. Only a foot would be visible to the enemy, so there was not much to shoot at. Then we trained our pony to walk or run right up to anything we wanted him to. We picked up a good-sized bush, shrub, or trunk of a tree. Our pony was trained to run up as close as he could to the object without dodging. Our pony must learn to go wherever he was told, even if there was shouting, yelling, and great noise and much confusion. A well-trained pony would go anywhere he was told to go by his rider. So boy and pony trained together for warfare. We grew hardy, and the more we would stand, the better we liked it. Although we scarcely ever fought among ourselves, still we played quite rough with each other. We often tried to see how much the other fellow would stand, and we were anxious to take all the rough handling we got. None of us wanted to be quitters. We wanted to be courageous and good-tempered. We pelted each other, we wrestled, we kicked, we hit each other, but all in fun. Of course, we got hurt sometimes, as do all boys, but we grew out so hardy in our body that we did not really mind. I've had the tears come to my eyes, but I would remember my father's words, "Son, be brave. Never give up. Fight to the last and make up your mind that you will win." Which all of this physical discipline, there was a mental training as well. Although I have lived many years and been in many trying situations, I've never struck a person in anger. Okay, and I remember Paul Twitchell talking about we should have the endurance of the primitives in one of his books. You know, we've kind of lost that with this society we live in. Everybody's passive and submissive, and unless you're an athlete or go to the gym or whatever, some kind of physical work, most people are with this computer age, they're just lost their physical vitality. And here's an example of what living in nature can do. It just can revitalize the body, keep it going. And even though things are tough, Duane and I were watching another series of Wagon Train. And if you know that show, Kevin, the 50s, late 50s shows, just one of these cowboy shows, Wagon Train. They had over 200 people in their in their entourage, but it was tough times. I mean, if the history is true, these people that ventured out west to start a new life, I mean, it's tough with facing the weather, the Indians, the hardships. But then that's in this new presentation too, things are tough, and what you go through on the real side with the reptilians and all things chasing you, all the monsters and the things you have to face, it's a good example of what we all face, both on the real side and here. But it's part of it, just part of it, are becoming more aware. That's just, this is it. Sorry, this is the earth, and this is how it is in creation. And it's actually an adventure. You learn from it, become more aware. So that's my bit for today, Kevin. You have a comment, or you want to go on with your section there?
Well, I just wanted to briefly say, in regards to what you were saying about the Indians and their horses and the way they treated them in comparison to how the white man had treated theirs and branded them, etc., and were very brutal and harsh with their horses. I just found it very interesting how the real awareness animates the body forms, and obviously there's a point where the body form will be taken on, where it is in a position where it's able to self-decide and activate free will, personal self-decision. And there's a point where, obviously, when still going through the body forms, that personal self-free will isn't available through those body forms until they reach a certain body form where it is, and until then they have this direct connection with their real awareness that animates them. And so all the animal forms will, the animal body types, the personal selves, will make sense with life because of the direct connection they have with their real awareness. But then there's obviously a point where the body forms then transition from the animal body form into one where they are now free will, self-deciding, and it's often curious as to what would have caused that to be so. And I can imagine then, as you were speaking about what you were just now, that it's very likely that as animals, through whatever decisions they make, or as they are moved through their real awareness to do so, start to associate more with people as in horses or as in pets. As they sort of do that, they are almost beginning to take on the consciousness of the human and taking on their various attitudes and mental ideas and such that they wouldn't have been doing as they were in animal forms, when they were directly animated through their real awareness and simply making sense with life. And then I can also imagine that depending on how these animals are then treated would determine what attitudes they may take on. And that could then dictate what sort of individual they then become when they do assume perhaps then a human body type, whether they are aggressively orientated or perhaps more passive. And so so based on that, I would say, I think a lot of animals that people decide are their pets, or are horses and such, animals that work with people. I think that is at the point where the very next body forms are very likely they're going to be taken on human body forms themselves, and almost being in association with humans or whatever the beings may be is almost allowing them that transition and to take on the various ideas that they need to then project into a body form that's then, like the human being, will be personal self, free will deciding, which of course then has them disconnect from their real awareness and immerse themselves and encase themselves in whatever they decide through their free will, personal self decisions. But that the attitudes that almost kick-starts their body forms as free will deciding personal self body forms can very much be dependent then on how they were treated as animals in the lifetimes when they made the association with people that facilitated them becoming people in their own right. If you see what I'm getting at.
I do very much. But then there's danger in a way, you could say, that if animals are domesticated, then they have this submissive thing that they carry with them as an engram too. So if we treat the animals like, help them become self-sufficient, then and then still have contact with us and gain, we both gain from that relationship, then their transition to human form can be even more so than coming into a human, having that experience as being supported by the humans, or domesticated to the point where they lose that instinct of survival. And there's that too. So at least I know Duane encourages that the animals be let go to be animals. You can still have a relationship, but let them be not the prisoners that they are here, but let them do what they do, naturally with their body forms. Support them and let them free. And if they want to establish a relationship with us, they can. In this case, Luther's Standing Bear, they took the ponies, in a sense, they forced them to come into their control. I know J.Do with Paul Twitchell, J.Do, I think he sensed Paul and what he was doing, so he came willingly. So it's whatever, but that's a good point though, Kevin. It's interesting how that could be. Animals are very neat to have them. We learn from each other, for sure. They don't, yeah.
I was going to add, based on that, what you were saying, if we make animals dependent upon us and make them very passive, and because they're in the company of people and very likely to then take on human body forms themselves, because we are then instilling in them then these ideas of being passive and dependent, then it's very likely these ideas and the consciousness will carry over. And so when you have these individuals then taking on the human body forms, it's very likely you then have a very passive and dependent person as well. And in a way, I can imagine if the dark forces knew that they would very much encourage the idea of having pets and making them dependent and making them passive, if they know that it's very likely then these are the individuals or we the next generation of slaves coming through, and they ideally would want them to be passive and dependent. So
exactly. Yeah. We'll go on before we run out of time here. See what you have here today.
Our planet is home to more than 10,000 species of trees, each with a name of its own, but only one among them all is named after a human being. This tree is a sequoia. The German poet Heinrich Heine said, "Like a great poet, nature produces the greatest results with the simplest means." Sequoias are survivors from the prehistoric era, standing among the dinosaurs that walked the earth, as the official histories would tell us anyway. These trees are the tallest and oldest in the world. Sequoia bears the name of a Cherokee leader who was known among Western colonists as George Gist. His unique gift to his people was a syllable system that was invented specifically for writing in his native language. This was one of the very few known cases of these people creating a functional writing system of their own. Since the sequoias require large amounts of water, they prefer the humid seashore air of the Pacific coast. Curiously, sequoias reproduce by seeds that can remain in their cones for up to 2 decades. Forest fires dry out the cones and help them open. Then the seeds fall on the soil that is free of weeds and rich in nutrients. The redwood tree would not be able to grow for thousands of years without a powerful means of protection. Its hardy bark grows up to 1 foot thick. It can withstand fire and shields the hardwood from heat. Safe behind this armor, sequoias can only benefit from forest fires, which wipe out the undergrowth, which is the giant tree's natural competition. Unlike other trees, sequoias don't die due to the ground level rising after floods, earthquakes, or landslides. The redwood giants simply grow a new tier of side roots at the right height and bolster the trunk. One 1,200-year-old fallen sequoia had as many as 7 different tiers of side root, and the first tier was 11 feet apart from the last. Other specimens have survived a 30-feet rise in the ground level. Despite the tree's ability to survive countless threats, the giants could not withstand the arrival of humans. During the gold rush era, the region was flooded with lumber industries. An experienced lumberjack was making up to $125 a month, which is the equivalent of $4,100 in today's money. Unlucky prospectors switched to logging, supplying the endless stream of migrants with timber, the principal building material of the era. The first filmed sequoia was cut down only to find out if such a feat was at all possible. These magnificent ancient beings were cut apart to decorate rail cars and steamer carriages, for roofing materials, telegraph poles, and the production of paper, furniture, and barrels. The hardy timber worked well as the outer layer of walls, protecting the inner layers from termites, bark beetles, and miller moths. They were used to build bridges, fire exits, and fire walls. Loggers felled the trees manually with axes and 2-handed saws. The timber was then transported by horseback or down rivers, later transported via railways. Transporting 1 sequoia tree required about 60 rail cars. It took a couple of decades to cut down about 95% of the towering trees. In 1850, the total area of the redwood forest exceeded 3,100 square miles, roughly the size of the Greek island of Crete. In our times, the trees occupy a small stretch of land, about 450 miles long. What forest fires and bark beetles could not accomplish over millions of years, humans did in the blink of an eye. At the height of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln decided to declare the big tree the symbol of the Republic. On June the 30th, 1864, he signed the act protecting the tree. But despite that, settlers kept cutting redwoods in other places. The huge sequoia, named Mark Twain, with the trunk of 33 feet in diameter, was finally cut down in 1891. The New York Museum of Natural History and the British Museum in London still have sections of the trunk on display. These trees were used as private houses, garages, restaurants, and hotels. In 1901, Theodore Roosevelt stood up for the fate of the ancient trees. The 26th president set out on a 3-day hike to Mariposa Grove, where the fate of sequoias was decided. These evergreen skyscrapers were finally recognized as a singular natural wonder. However, it wasn't until 1918 that the harvesting of the prehistoric giants was stopped, and the non-profit organization Save the Redwoods League was created. Sequoias had become an officially recognized natural landmark, but only about 30 groves of these trees have survived to this day. People have given individual names to the most remarkable sequoia specimens: President, Forest Mother, Chief Sequoia, the Senate, Chandelier, Grizzly Giant, to name a few, and each one has impressive characteristics. The 400-foot-tall Father of Woods has a trunk diameter of 40 feet. Founder is 367 feet high, and Patriarch measures higher than 473 feet. The coast redwood varieties are considered the tallest tree in the world, while Sequoia Dendron giganteum has the widest trunk. The relatively young, only 700 to 800-year-old redwood Hyperion, discovered only in 2006 and named after a mythological titan, has grown to 377 feet. Scientists say that further growth of the tree is impossible due to the omnipresent woodpeckers damaging the top, which is peculiar, as birds don't generally favor sequoia forests. Among the giants is one named General Sherman. Its estimated trunk volume of 52,500 cubic feet, the trunk circumference at the ground of 103 feet, and the height of 275 feet, and the total weight of 1,910 tons. The age of Sherman is 2,200 years old. In 2006, the tree lost part of its crown, a 100-foot-long, 6-feet-wide branch. Despite the loss, Sherman keeps growing. despite the massive losses attributed to the harvesting of the past. It's believed that 5 millennia old redwoods possibly still exist somewhere, and that is only an approximate figure, as the exact age of a tree is difficult to establish. The English poet William Blake once said, "The tree that moves some to tears of joy is in the eyes of others only a green thing that stands in the way. To the eyes of the man of imagination, nature is imagination itself."
Yeah, it's interesting how the indigenous people, the American Indians, for example, they were, educated in the ways of the environment, and they would, I mean, imagine why would they cut down something like magnificent as the giant sequoias? I doubt that they even tried, but when they did harvest materials from the environment, they'd do so in a way where they would not harm the reproduction of these materials, that they would harvest certain parts of the plant so the plant could keep growing, whatever. Again, with the white man just destroys everything in their way, basically. So when we talk about education, that one of the big things is education of the environment, how we can use plants for medicine and shelter and everything, but in a way where we can just keep it self-sustaining and keep nature and not destroy it. Just keep and use what we can, but help maintain it. So that was cool, Kevin. That was cool. That information. And like I say, I grew up in the West Coast, so I've seen these redwoods. They're just magnificent. And they can bring you to tears because they're so majestic and all that. But let's keep them. Let's help people become more aware so that they don't destroy things like this. And if they do, well, like the Indians, honor them in some way, that, that with gratitude for what they do give us. So, okay, anything else, Kevin? Kind of end of our time here.
No, not really. Nothing else really from me, other than what we were briefly touching on earlier before the show started, about the fact there is evidence of gigantic trees miles tall that still exist in the world today, like the Devil's Tower stump in Wyoming. And so we might well be touching on some of these subjects in future shows.
We look forward to hearing for that. Yeah, from you. Thank you. Report back, please. Okay, let's sing NUUU, and then we've got another show coming up. So it's NUUU.
NUUU.
Thanks, Kevin.